So this is Catherine from Shetland Library in conversation with Jen Hadfield, poet, author and all-round good egg. We're here to speak about your book, Storm Pigs. So Jen, you're a successful poet, you're an award-winning poet, you were the youngest female poet to be awarded the T.S. Eliot Prize for only your second collection back in 2008. Why decide to write something that's not poetry? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, that's a long time ago. It's taken a really long time to write this book. It's over 10 years in the writing, I think. Well, I wanted to write a sort of poetry, I guess, and a kind of prose poetry, and I was thinking Shetland would be a cool place to write about in a kind of micro essay form. So some really short prose poetry passages, which I wanted to be really intense and experiential, just about what I was doing here and experiences I was having, and asking questions that were pressing to me at the moment, and ideally really in the present tense, so that hopefully the reader would feel like these experiences were hitting them as intensely as they were me. I've got a funny kind of mind. I guess all minds are kind of funny, but I really struggle to have a coherent linear thread of thought.
Okay.
Which is the kind of thing I think might be useful if you were writing an extended prose narrative and turning it into a book. So I thought I'll need a different form that can hold my brain shape in a way. I'm quite butterfly-mindy. So I thought that'll work. But maybe I can collage those pieces together and create something that is non-fiction but really subjective, that can say this is just my take on where I am. This isn't a definitive account of a place, because that would be a guidebook and I would be rubbish at writing one of those. And then there was a slow evolution through various editors, turning it into a more continuous prose narrative, which was quite hard. But I think I'm happy with the form in retrospect. I feel like I got somewhere I wanted to be with it.
Is it a memoir? Is it a nature book? Is it a book about Shetland? Is it a book about you? What would you define it as being?
I would call it a book of lyrical essays. But it's probably quite rare that you go into a bookshop and you pick up a mainstream book and it says, where it defines what it is on the back. It's very rare you see lyrical essay on the back. So I think it stands non-fiction here, which is quite nice. I mean, I was going to poke at everything, For me, it probably is also a work of fiction in a way, because I always feel like with poetry, with prose, when you're working with language and you're trying to make it as good as it can be, you're doing what the material wants you to do, and I think that's a fictionalization process myself. But in theory, non-fiction, I wouldn't call it a memoir myself, because for me, the way I've explained it to myself is that for me a memoir is turning a lens around to look at the author. What I wanted to do was turn that lens around, look out at the world, but completely couch that in my often quite weird perspective on the world.
What's the general feeling been about it?
It's been nice. It's been a lovely experience, and as a poet, it's not that only poets read poetry, but it's definitely a smaller audience. And I suppose when you publish a poetry book, you're not expecting a huge amount of feedback from the world, increasingly so as well. I think things get reviewed in general less. So it's been really nice to have folk sometimes stop me on the street, say I've read your book and I really liked it, and that's meant a huge amount to me. It probably means more to me when it's a Shetlander saying it, because that's been one of my main anxieties, that I would miss the point or misrepresent or appropriate or any of those terrifying literary scenarios.
You were very respectful in how you learnt, and it was what you love about the place.
I think that's the only way I could write it, really, because I think if you go into the world open and receptive, then people come and meet you and they share stuff with you, and you get a fuller, more complicated picture of the world that way. And you just know if you come across authoritarian, or I'm the authority on this or that, people it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction to that tone, that people need to say, but this detail's wrong, and I make a lot of mistakes. Proofreading this book was really hard work. But do you know what? I think there's lots of different kinds of truth, and I'm very bad at numbers and facts. I get those wrong all the time, but there's also, I suppose, different kinds of truth about the world, which aren't kind of quantifiable, but still kind of recognisable, shared experiences. And I hope.
Did you have ideas about, I want to include that, I don't want to put that in, I want to have this in definitely and it needs to be there? Or
I kind of wanted everything in, and because that's what it feels like. Yeah, I'm so busy. My first draft that I submitted to my editor was 200,000 words long, and they came back and said, yes, a good start. 70,000 words is what you need to be kind of moving towards. I can't lose that much material, but it turned out I was just being a bit wordy quite often. So I tried to lose wordage where it wasn't earning its place. A lot of stuff I took out and then I snuck it back in, and this is a lot more than 70,000 words as it happens. That became possible. But planning, I wanted to capture moments, so I just tried to not decide what to write and not to sketch out a structure, and not even to plan the train of my thought, because that's not the way my mind works, and I didn't want there to be that kind of mediated sense in the writing. I wanted it just to feel like it was happening. That made my job really difficult when it came to making a coherent narrative. But also there's this time thing in that I feel like is it 19 years I've been here, something like that. It feels like I've been on a kind of a cyclical time experience, because the seasons are really in your face here. And there's things you look forward to every year, and the social calendar, the cultural calendar, and folk festival, film festival when we had it. It's one of the wonderful things about living here is I've not been to the half of what is there that you could go to. You know? There's still something new every year, but you're aware of these things coming around with this slow and steady beat, and pulling against that, there's this incredible rapid sense of change here. So it's these two different types of time that are rubbing up against each other, and I kind of wanted to capture that a bit and also make it not too confusing. And it got really hard to write when I was trying to say something about events that everyone would recognise, like lockdown, or the construction timetable for the massive wind farm here. Like those things folk would be maybe aware of, and then that would pin it down to a place in time, and then suddenly that would throw my own sense of time off. So I was trying to kind of juggle that a bit.
When did you start writing it, and when did you finish?
I did have a moment in lockdown, because I was in Manchester for a few months of it, when I couldn't really get home. I thought I will use this to good advantage, and I'll get cracking on this difficult book. But I'd been writing passages towards it before that by a few years. I think I really started thinking of it as a book rather than as isolated pieces of writing probably in 2016, which is when I gave up a house I was renting in Borough, and that's when I started being back and forth a lot more. But yeah, it took a long time. I imagine people have post-it notes on their wall with a mapped out structure, and they know what they're going to say in each chapter, and they start at the beginning and they work through to the end, and then maybe they edit it, but it's just temperament probably. People approach things different ways. But I also edited the book really rigorously, as a poet would, I think, to take out all the things which are hard to say. sometimes poets fill their poems with things which are hard to say deliberately, but for me, I want there to be that fluency and that ease and places to breathe, and I think that mirrors a brain state where you can be receptive to what someone's saying, and I feel like there's a kind of courtesy that I'm trying for there, where you're not like bombarding someone as I am just now in this very long sentence.
I found that it was a good book to gift to people who maybe haven't been to Shetland and don't maybe know what it's like here. You certainly challenge the idea of Shetland being remote. Can you talk a bit about that?
The earlier drafts of the book were quite quite knee-jerky, I think, because while I was writing it, I was back and forth south a lot. I was working, doing lots of freelance stuff south, and I'd be home whenever I could be. Lots of events, lots of meeting folk that I didn't know, that didn't know me, that didn't know Shetland. And you just get these really strange questions, and they're quite surreal. And it made me kind of realise, gradually, that people are really confused about what Shetland might be like, or even where it is. I quote a stationer from Altrincham in South Manchester, which is where I grew up, in the book, and wanted to know where I lived, and I told him, and luckily it was far, far away, and he's like, oh, isn't that very remote, and don't you miss trees? And I thought, oh, that's it in a nutshell, the way people perceive of us. Why do they see us like that?
Why would you live somewhere without trees?
I mean, I can see quite a lot of trees just from the window here. So I started really kind of probing into how people imagine Shetland and my experience of it, thinking about that subjectivity all the time. And I've come up against some really funny ones, but I kind of knew when I was doing it, and I was on my hobby horse, that I was fighting a losing battle when the book came out, and we recorded the audiobook, which I really enjoyed doing. And the audible description of the book is something like recorded in a remote studio in Shetland.
There's that word again.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's in a really really good studio with really brilliant sound engineers in a really gorgeous venue, in the heart of the bustling hub of the centre of our shared universe. But people will never guess at that if they don't know the place.
Yeah. What would you like people to take from the book, I would say?
Do you know what, I think most of my motivation in writing and in like recording calm audiobooks, if I can, is all quite selfish, and I think I've got a mind that's quite easily overloaded, and I experience the world quite intensely sometimes, and for me it's a really helpful tool to digest all of that and process it, to write it, but also that intense experience of the world feels so precious, and I feel it slipping away all the time, just as the present tense slips away from us all the time, and I want to record it. You know, I've got this urge to record things in the world, and that's what my poetry's always tried to do as well. It's just say, look at this gorgeous thing, or look at this gorgeous place, or look at this wonderful person.
Do you work with a lot of notebooks?
Lots and lots.
Do you have a notebook in your handbag right now?
I do.
Yeah, because it's like your observations about different things. I would imagine that you carry a notebook just in case you have that moment.
Yeah, I think that's the only way I can probably capture the detail that would make somebody feel like they were in that moment with you. But then you've got to kind of come back to it afterwards, and you know, you might have had a conversation with someone that you've transcribed as close as you can, word for word, and you kind of need to go to them and say, are you okay with this? Because it's like you've taken something from them, you know. You got to give them a chance to say, no, I don't want to be in your book. I don't want to be looked at publicly.
Yeah. You said that you have a bit of a fascination with the Shetland dialect, the Shetland language. Can you talk a bit about that, about your interest in the language? Yeah,
I mean, I can feel the nervousness in my hands as I think about it, because it's really, I think it's really important, and I love the language, and I really didn't want to get it wrong, and I thought, well, and the main reason I don't want to get it wrong is because it feels to me like it's an endangered language, potentially. although the tide can turn in language very quickly, I think. And I think I say in the book, the conclusion I've come to is that the way to keep a language alive is to use it joyously and confidently and playfully. And unfortunately, I think when we start getting anxious about the fate of a language, then sometimes the response can be to try and protect it and to fix it. But language doesn't like being fixed, you know. It likes to evolve and speak to the world we're in and to stay relevant, I think. There's lots of things that can happen, you know, in a culture with language, but I love it, I think, as a poet, because I've heard words that are so incredibly precise in Shetland that if I'm going to express the same sense of a word in English, I need a whole sentence.
Yeah.
Like Spiggy is the example I always turn to. That what you feel in your body when you wake up in the morning and you're stiff and you're sore and you can barely move, but there's a kind of a pride in there too, because you know you've shifted a lot of soil or whatever you've done, you know. But the way we have to translate that into English, you don't get any of that embodied sense. But somehow in the word Spiggy, I can feel it, you know, and it's, for a poet, that's the kind of precision that conveys experience, I think. So I love that. I suppose also for me it's exotic, so I have to be quite careful that I'm not kind of appropriating it or treating it as an exotic object. And I'm also really aware that as an English speaker, Shetland speakers will not be speaking Shetland to me very often, you know, and that's quite involuntary, you know. It's if you're speaking one way and someone else is speaking another way, the natural thing for us all to do subconsciously is to meet each other somewhere in the middle, and our voices change. And I sort of appreciate someone meeting me halfway, and I also feel a bit sad that they have to, you know. So it's a tricky, slippery thing to write about, but it's so precious and hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it here.
What's next for you?
I'm just trying to remember. my baby boy is 20 months now, so sometimes it's a couple hours where I can work, but there's very little work happening. I was really chuffed with myself for asking Picadorma publishers to bring out a selected poems if they were up for it, because I thought this is a way to bring out a poetry book without actually having time to write any poems. It's not even just time, it's the headspace thing, you know. It's like that. I feel like poetry is sometimes taking a couple of steps back from your life and looking at it. As closely as you can.
There's no time for that with
There's no time for that. I mean, I've only got one, you know. I know folk with 4, and I'm wondering how they're keeping their heads above water, but they're doing it brilliantly.
I think I read on your blog that you said that you really struggled with being able to write when you were pregnant.
Yeah. Maybe I just wanted to too much. I didn't want to forget it. And it was that, as I said earlier, I think I write to process experience because it's right up here, and it gives me that a step back, and I can kind of marvel at it. And I felt so immersed in pregnancy and the way it was just happening, and I was so happy about that. You know, I didn't think it was going to happen to me, and it happened late. So I really wanted to record it, and it was quite hard to step out of the moment, and I was working really hard, frantically, like just as much teaching as I could do before Robin arrived. And there's a strange thing that happened as well. You know, there's obviously been a lot of sitting, lying, feeding, being awake when I wouldn't normally. So there's been lots of time to kind of have ideas for things, but no time to act on any of them, which makes you feel a bit full and mad sometimes. I really want to write a book about having a baby here. I think that'd be lovely, because it's been such a positive experience for me, and I've met lots of new folk and done lots of different things, and he's so great. So I'd like to do that, and I did scribble some incoherent notes in the first 6 months, and after that it just all stopped. So we'll see.
I would love to see your perspective on things in the future about your your take on motherhood or anything else from...
I'd like to think about that, and that means a lot, just knowing someone would read something, you know. But I think, yeah, motherhood's so interesting. Midwives are so amazing. Yeah, that would be really fun. I want to write about love, I think, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but the power of that, and you see the world differently when you're surrounded by mothers who are helping each other, and midwives and all those other amazing people who are continually doing these amazing jobs quite quietly.
Yeah.
And also it felt like this hidden world just kind of opened up, and I was like, but I didn't know any of this.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Jen, for coming and speaking to me about the book, and
thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Best of luck with whatever you do in the future as well.
And I wish I could be with you all in person.